Welcome to Surrender School. This is the Essential Enneagram Empowered 12-Step Workshop. So today we are covering steps 6 and 7. I'm calling this session Building a Cohesive Unit, and it's 6 and 7 together. I want to share real quick. So step 6 is we're entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character, and 7 is humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. This was given to me as a gift. It's step 7.5, which I think is hilarious. And it says, made a list of all people we have harmed and asked God to remove them. So anyway, I love that. That obviously is not really a step, but I thought it was really funny. And I don't know, Cynthia, if you're here, but if you are, thank you for giving that to me. That's an awesome gift. All right. The goal, once again, the goal is a personal journey. I say not intended to teach you the Enneagram like about other people, but it certainly hopefully is teaching you the Enneagram about yourself. So one of the side benefits is that you can kind of look at other people and maybe be a little more compassionate toward them. Its intent of this is to help you recognize the wonderful person that you already are so that you can relax into your true self where the God of your understanding resides, or at least you. How we're going to do that is to recognize the unseen forces that drive our behaviors. That's that ego structure, right? The passions and fixations. And we do that by catching ourselves in the act and doing things that ego causes us to act out, or when ego causes us to act out our persistent defects, and then to gently remind ourselves to return to our true shining self. Okay, some things to keep in mind. I'm not an expert on anything. I'm learning as I go, and I appreciate your patience through all of this. Recovery is a process, not an event. Self-contempt stops spiritual growth, at least it did me, which is what really compelled me to share the Enneagram with other people, because it helped me basically get rid of the self-contempt, or at least lessen it a lot. I keep the homework to a minimum because I really do believe you can learn everything you need to learn about the Enneagram and your recovery during the sessions. So the books are nice because some people learn that way better than just hearing it. Most of us are, which, by the way, the reason I have very complex and interesting slides, and I think obviously beautiful slides, it's what I did for a living. But one of the reasons I do that is because most people are visual learners as opposed to auditory learners. So if you're just talking, if you always wonder why you listen to podcasts and you don't remember too much, it's because you're probably not an audio learner, an auditory learner. Most people aren't. Most people are visual learners. So when you tie the audio speaking to visual support, which is what the slides do, you remember it better. All right. And I focus on my own type because I know what it feels like to be an 8. I don't know what it feels like to be any of the other types. So that's the reason that I use my 8-ness as an example. Okay. So what this session is going to be about is, I believe that we can use the Enneagram to help us understand those layers of protection that we built up. And then that is how we dissipate them. Because if you can't see it, you can't change it. If you can't see it, you don't even recognize it needs to be changed. So the whole idea of this, and actually program is the same thing. Program allows us, step 4 and 5, allows us to see that, what are the nature of my defects? How have I behaved outside of whatever, right? And then it shows you from that protection, that wall that you've built up, and that allows God then to help dissipate it. That's really kind of the point. Okay. This is what I'm going to have you do today. Instead of sharing on this, what I'd like you to do, and we will capture this, I'd like you to put your type and your theme song. If you came up with the theme song, I want you to go to the chat and put in your type and your theme song in the chat. And what Joy will do after a couple of minutes, she will go ahead and pull the chat and save it, and then we'll probably talk about it next week. But if you have the chance to come up with a theme song that helps you soften that, I don't know if I talked about this last week or not, but my theme song, and be typing while I'm talking on this if you would, my theme song, some years ago, in my long career of many jobs, one of my jobs for about a decade, I was a deputy sheriff in Boulder, Colorado. And I can remember I worked like 30 days straight, 12-hour days. I was absolutely exhausted. I had an asshole for a boss. It's entirely possible I was the asshole and he wasn't. I just thought I'd say that. But anyway, and I was just beyond stressed, just overwhelmed. And I remember I went out to my car and I sat and I just let tears fall. And I'm not a crier. I just let my tears fall and I listened to Steve Winwood's roll with it. And that has been like throughout my adult life, that has been the theme song that helps me remember when life gets too tough, roll with it. Just roll with it. Because once again, the eights want to be in control. And there are times almost every time I can't be in control, not appropriately in control. So I just need to roll with it. So that's my theme song. Put your theme song. And once again, very often what will happen is people will think of a theme song that gets them stuck in that ego structure, because that ego structure we believe is our personality. The goal of this exercise is to say, okay, if I can relax that, what would my theme song be, right? It would change. I was joking the other day, it's like, I'm hoping that nobody chose Highway to Hell. Although we listen to that all the time here. My husband is a fan, I guess. Anyway, but it's a great song to do dishes to, by the way. All right. I think I'm ready to move on. Thank you, everybody, for doing that. This should be a really fun discussion next week, I think. Okay. So step 6 and 7, and I put 6 and 7 together for a couple of reasons. One is because now 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, this is a 12-week session. We started with 0, so 6 and 7 together puts us back kind of in line at 8. But also because I think that 6 and 7 basically do work together, and I'll explain in what way I think they work together. But we're entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. Okay. I think this picture is just amazingly haunting, and I have felt like this in my lifetime. I talked about that the purpose of this class is because each time I work the steps, I would go deeper into self-contempt. So you'll notice at the top, I say the 17th-ish time you go through the steps is what I'm talking about. The perfect audience for this Enneagram class is someone who has already worked the steps. The reason I say that is because I do believe our first time through the steps is it busts our balls, and it's supposed to. It is supposed to kick our ass, absolutely. Because we come on our knees, and we are on our knees, and that is absolutely the only thing that will crack that shell, because we're addicts. And as addicts, we come to this, and I mean, it busts our balls. It's supposed to. That's exactly what is supposed to happen. What happens over time, though, at least for me, is then I end up in this kind of a merry-go-round, which isn't merry at all, of self-contempt. And I don't want to live there. I cannot live there. Okay. Now, one of the things that I believe, so what I'm covering right now is after, if you're working with sponsees, after they've gone through the steps, because that idea that there are wrongs, it was my fault, I am the author of all these problems, that's absolutely necessary to reach that. But once you've accepted that, then I think we go through the steps or work through this. And now I want you to think of defects as defenses. So if you think of it from this perspective, we're entirely ready to have God remove these defenses, this wall that I built up, that I believed all these years was me, that isn't me. There's a true self that is gentler, kinder, loving, right? And so this wall that I built up, that's what I am completely ready for God to remove that. Absolutely. I don't want those in place anymore. I don't need them. I needed them as a child. I don't need them now. So the idea is if I can soften that instead of defects, because defects have, I work with Linda T, and one of the things that she talks about is we tend to turn everything into a moral issue. And when we do that is when we hate ourselves. So changing this from defect to defenses removes that whole moral issue thing. And it just basically says, well, of course I built these defenses up. I needed them as a child. I don't need them as much now, right? So they are defenses, and they are natural that this happened. It's just natural, okay? So we were entirely ready to have God remove these defenses. Please, God, remove these defenses. Okay, so that is step 6. And what I found when I did this, it just softened the whole thing. And there was it got rid of this blame or this, I'm a piece of shit stuff. It just went away. And then for step 7, it talks about shortcomings. I've heard a lot of people just say that's another word for defects and blah, blah, blah. And actually, she says in the book, and I really like this, and she is quoting someone else, but I really like it. And the shortcomings are where we have fallen short. where I've made a mistake or I didn't follow through or I didn't do what I needed to do. It's that kind of thing. These are things where I backed away when I should have gone forward, right? And so I'm humbly asking him to remove those shortcomings. And those two things together means the things I overdid, the things I underdid. I'm ready for God to remove those, and I'm going to ask him to do it. And the seventh step prayer basically says, what we pray for is to remove all the things that stand in the way of our usefulness, right? So if it's not standing in the way of our usefulness, maybe it still stays. I don't know, right? But even that's okay because I'm giving it to God and I call my higher power God. So anyway, one way to look at this is specifically that, and an outcome of that then becomes self-love. This is how you do it. You remove that whole moral issue thing from it, right? I'm asking God, I'm ready to have God remove the defenses, and I'm asking him to remove these areas that I fallen short. Help me to remove those things so that they don't continue to happen. And then that allows me to have self-love, which this whole course is about, and frankly, Surrender School is about. All right, so let's talk about what makes steps 6 and 7 difficult for my type, or what might. All right, so for the type 1, because they have this judgmental and sometimes perfectionistic view of things, right? What might make it difficult is some defects feel right. It feels right to call people out for this. It feels like the right thing. And there's also the fear that who am I if I don't have what sometimes they'll call discernment. I love that when one say, well, I'm not judgmental, but I am discerning. Yeah, it's the same thing. Yes, you are. Okay. So and if I'm not that, if I'm not the arbiter of what is right, what am I, right? There's that fear. For the 2, they have a disbelief that these are defects at all. They're kind and they're generous and they're helpful. They're unwilling to see themselves as selfish. And this is a perfect example of stepping on the toes of their fellows. They don't even realize that they did, right? So this makes it, and they're unwilling to see themselves as selfish. Okay, for the 3, this goes much deeper than I'm willing to go, and I don't even know that that's the case, right? 3s are just, they kind of abandon. They just kind of say, yeah, I'm not going to do that. For the 4s, without my defects, I may become like a normal person. I may be boring like a normal person. I hate that. I hate the idea of doing that, is what the way the 4 looks at the world. The 5, my defects are quiet and they don't hurt anyone except maybe myself. And they're probably right. They may not hurt other people, but they could hurt themselves. And I don't mean hurt as in physically hurt, but it's, they're observing instead of living life. Sometimes that happens. Okay. For the 6, wringing hands is the way that I live. How will I function without it? So there is a fear of not being afraid. See how the 6 is very, very complex, I think, right? So they are afraid of not being afraid because they don't know how would they live their life if they weren't afraid. I'm not a 6 at all, but I identify with this. I think I mentioned before, my family had a car accident that my mom eventually died from. And after that, like my whole life until very recently, it was imperative that I say, drive safely to anybody that I love that was leaving somewhere. So when people come to visit my house and they leave, I say, okay, drive safe, always, always. Now I'm not compelled to do it. I still just do it. But I mean, I would chase my husband down the street if I hadn't had a chance to tell him to drive safely, right? Because I don't know how to function with, well, now I do. I mean, I'm okay with that, but right, it's almost like a talisman. So I kind of get the 6 a little bit there. Okay. For the 7, I like my defects. They make me interesting, right? So the 7s like their defects, they think. All right. The 8s, what others see as defects, I see as good. What if I lose my larger than life persona, right? 8s have a lot of life energy. What if that goes away? And then I'm just like, what would I be then? So that's hard. And then for the 9, they just want to let it unfold. It'll unfold if it's supposed to unfold without my help at all, right? So those might be some of the reasons. At the bottom, I put journal on this. When has it shown up in your life? If it hasn't shown up in your life, look closer. It's possible that you have the wrong type. It's also possible you're lying to yourself. Just kidding. Well, I'm not kidding. I'm serious, but anyway. So if it hasn't shown up in your life, either look closer, see if you're the right or wrong type, one or the other. Okay, So rather than loads of new information, because you figure we've now gone 6 weeks with lots of information and it's all kind of out there in pieces. And so I called this session today getting your shit together. So, but I'm going to be the one that gets your shit together. So what I'm going to do is take all the pieces that we've learned so far and help you figure out how do we put all of this together? Because there's been several questions that people have asked, which are great questions, and they'll ask, well, how does this work with this? And I figured, okay, this is a good time to sit down with what we've learned so far and just kind of pull it all together in a way that hopefully will help you make this a little bit more cohesive than it's been so far. All right. So I want you to think about, I'm going to take a drink here real quick, sorry. I want you to think about this wall that we built up. I talk about the cracking the egg, cracking the shell. I talk about the wall we built up. I want you to think of that as layers of armor. She mentions it in the book, and then I kind of picked up on it. Said that's the metaphor I want to use. So I want you to imagine that it is layers of armor. So first of all, we all have instincts, right? We all have instincts. And the deepest coping strategy is those instincts. It is our first move away from true self. So that basically, remember, we talked about that little baby in the crib doesn't get picked up in 2 minutes and suddenly, right? So that's what we're talking about. The deepest coping strategy, our first move away from true self, is the instincts. And remember, there are the three instincts. There's the self-pres instinct, which is withdrawing instinct, right? Do we withdraw? The social, which is connecting, and the sexual, which or one-to-one which is approaching. And this is how we defend ourselves as children. We begin to build that wall, and it's the very first move away from our true self. All right, the next, we all have a heart center. This is where we feel our feelings, right? So we all have a heart center. So the next layer, coping strategy, right, is that heart center. And that's where the passion comes from. That's where and once again, remember, the passion is what's caused us most of our suffering, right? And that's how we feel and how we act. It's the second move away from the true self. So that's that next layer of armor that we put on, and it defends ourselves against life. So the instincts defend us as children, right? This next layer then gets built up over time, and it defends us against life. And the third one is the final coping strategy that she mentions in the book, right? And it's where the fixations are. We all have a head center, and our head center makes everything okay. It rationalizes all the stuff that is caused by the passion. We make it okay, right? These are the stories that we tell ourselves. And that defends us against self-hatred. Because if I really took a look at the passions and didn't know how to control them, I would hate myself over this behavior. I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to act this way, right? So I make it okay. And it is also a coping strategy. It's a way to cope with, right? The fear, the anger, it's a way to cope with that. And it defends us against our self-hatred. Now, if I were teaching this to not 12-steppers, I would stop here. But we have an extra layer. We have one more coping strategy, and that is addiction. We go to the food, we go to the alcohol, we go to the drugs. It's one more coping strategy. And the way that you basically let these go starts with the outer layer, just like you would take off armor. So the first thing we do is we deal with the addiction. We do the 12 steps. The next thing we do is we deal with the fixations. What are the stories I'm telling myself? The next thing we do is we deal with the feelings. How do I act? Gets off first. I'm going to stop acting that way. How do I feel? I let the feelings feel. Feelings aren't facts, right? They may be real because I feel them, but they aren't necessarily true, right? I might be completely wrong in the reality of whatever that is, but it is the way I feel. So, okay, let yourself feel. Be on a bridge, watching the feelings just kind of flow by, right? And then the final one are the instincts, and then we balance the instincts. So hopefully this explains kind of all of these pieces kind of all together. All right. So what is up with all the threes, right? I say triad and triune brain, and right? And I get quite a few questions about that. So I want to talk about that because first of all, 3 is a deal with human beings. It just is. Three shows up like all the time, right? In almost every religion of the world, there's something to do with threes. So threes are a big deal. But what I want to talk about is I want to be sure that everybody understands the difference between like a heart center, head center for me as a person, and then also for the Enneagram itself. For the Enneagram, I'll say diagram. Okay. So when we speak of threes within the 12-step program, there's physical, emotional, spiritual, right? It's threes. And everybody's pretty clear on that. All right. In ourselves, we have a body center, which responds to instincts. We have heart center, which is where we feel our feelings. And we have a head center, which is where we think our thoughts, right? So people will talk about the body center, the heart center, and the head center as a person. And then also the diagram, right, has body or an instinctual triad, which is that top 8, 9, and 1, the heart or feelings triad, which is 2, 3, and 4, and the head and thinking triad, which is 5, 6, and 7. So a lot of people will get these confused because they're similar words, right? They're similar words, and sometimes they even use the same words. So the way I want you to look at this is the bright blue box is a person. It's me. This is me. I have a body center, a heart center, and a head center. I have that. The bottom one is the diagram. It also has that. And they're actually unrelated. Not completely unrelated, but it isn't the same thing, right? So I want you to look at this. The bright blue box is life. This is life. This is me. This is personal. The pink box at the bottom is like, it's like, this is my life, and that's the story of my life. That's the book about my life. So the Enneagram diagram and all that is the book about life, right? And so, and one way that I look at it is that body, heart, and triad is almost like a graph that says, what are we overusing and underusing? Where, right? And if we're in, like, if we live in the feelings triad, because we're a 3 or a 4, and fours, there are quite a few 4s in here, right? So so a 4 lives in the heart or feelings triad. They live, that's basically, they're a 4. They live in that triad. But all of us, including 4s, have a body center, a heart center, and a head center. Very often, what will happen is they will overuse, I'll use that, the heart. They're overusing that. And I'm not saying they're too much, because usually 4s are told all the time that they're too much. No, you're not. You've built up this defense, right? If you relax that defense, guess what? You're just right. You're not too much. You're not too much at all. It's in defense of that, right? And I know this is an 8 because I've been told my whole life that I'm too much, right? Fuck them. Just kidding. I'm not kidding. I'm serious. But anyway, yeah, 8s are told that all the time. And I had to come with this idea of how do I show up and be authentic to myself, right? But I'll tell you what, how do I show up and be authentic to myself and not put a lid on who I am, but still be like appropriate for the room, right? And the easiest way to do it, the only way to do that is basically I dissipate that defense that feels like I have to defend being an 8. I don't have to defend that. I am. This is my true self. This is who I am. Anyway, I hope that this explains this, because the questions I keep getting are, now, is this the body center, and is that tied to the instinctual triad, or whatever, right? It's like they're tied like life about life. They're tied like that, but that's all. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. And all of it is about, once again, getting back to self-love. One of the things I want to point out is notice what came up. This is the Surrender School logo. I'm going to go back up so you can see that. See that logo? That means self-love. And there's the Surrender School. This course is about self-love, and so is Surrender School about self-love. All right. This is probably, of all the stuff I've taught, the most important, because it determines how you are wired. That might be backwards. The way you were wired might determine this, but they're intrinsically linked, and this really does decide your type. When all is said and done, this is what determines the type. And then that is nature, and then there's all the nurture and all that stuff that comes up, right? But this is the most important thing so far, and that is our true self has a basic fear that we defend against and a basic desire that we seek. It is absolutely hardwired in us, and it is why we build the defenses that we build. So I'm going to go over the basic fears of each type, and I'm going to go over the basic desires of each type. Now, if you have your fill-in sheet, at the bottom of the fill-in sheet, you want to basically make a couple of lines, because you're going to write down for your type the basic fear when I show it to you, and you're going to write down the basic desire, because that is the final piece to the fill-in sheets from past weeks. This is the final piece. Okay, notice at the top up here, see down, there's a big space because this is a print of a PowerPoint slide, which leaves room at the bottom. So you want to write basic fear and basic desire, and then I'm going to go over all these. Okay, so the basic fear for the one, their basic fear is they're afraid of being defective. As a matter of fact, they're afraid that they are defective. The two, they are afraid of being unloved or unwanted. The three is afraid that they have no value apart from their achievements, that their only value comes through their achievements. The four has the fear that they have no personal significance. The five has a fear of being helpless. The six has a fear of being unable to survive on their own. The seven has a fear of being trapped, and specifically trapped in pain or deprived. The eight has a fear of being controlled. And the nine has a fear of being destroyed. Okay, so be sure to write down the basic fear for your type on your fill-in sheet. All right, here are the basic desires. The basic desire of the type 1 is to be virtuous. The basic desire of the type 2 is to feel loved. The basic desire of the type 3 is to feel worthwhile. I want to talk for a second about 2 and 3 and feel, right? Because they're certainly part of the triad that is the feeling triad. And notice it doesn't say to be loved or to be worthwhile. It's to feel it. And very often what happens is when they build that defense, I often say with the 2, no matter how much they're thanked, if their defenses are in place, they don't feel thanked. They don't hear the thank you. They don't, right? They don't feel the love. The same thing with the 3. They're constantly do, prove myself, right? But they never quite feel worthwhile. Once the defenses are down, they can feel love. They can feel worthwhile, right? Super important for the feeling triad. Okay, the 4s, their basic desire is to create an identity out of their own inner experience. So they don't want anyone else. The 2 and 3 are defined like outwardly, right? The world defines them. The 4 really wants to define themselves. They want to create an identity out of their own experience, not out of someone else's view of them. One of the reasons they collide in the world. Okay. All right. The 5, their basic desire is to be competent. The 6, their basic desire is to find support and through that get security. For the 7, their basic desire is to be happy, satisfied, and to find fulfillment. To 8, their basic desire is to determine their own course in life. And for the 9, their basic desire is inner stability and peace of mind. So go ahead and write that down, if you will, on your sheet. So you should now have that sheet completely filled out, except for the upper right, which has the S blank, S blank, S. So if you know the stacking of your instincts, you can put that on there, but that may be something that we take a look at later on. Okay. What I want to cover now is just a little bit deeper into these, what is called the triads. So basically, we have the body triad, which is at the top, the 8, 9, and 1. And I've mentioned this stuff before, but I'm just going just a little bit deeper. But in the body triad, they live in the present. And it doesn't mean that they're like, how they talk about, you be present and you live in today and all that. It doesn't mean that necessarily. It's great. I mean, I think our true selves absolutely do, but it doesn't mean that we're good at it. In any of these doesn't mean we're good at it. But anyway, so they focus on the present. Their underlying emotion is anger. Okay. For the 2, 3, and 4, this is called the feeling triad. And the past is very alive to them. So they're the ones that will, romanticize the past, or in some cases, they had the worst childhood of anyone in the entire world, like that, right? But the past is very alive to them. And their their underlying emotion is shame. And then the 5, 6, and 7 is the thinking triad. And that looks at the future, right? They look at the future and kind of live in the future-ish. And then their underlying emotion is fear. And I talked before about that In each of those triads, one expresses whatever that is, one disconnects from it, and one has trouble with it. And what I've learned since I talked about this last is the first one expresses, the middle one disconnects, and then the third one has trouble in some sort. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to start with 8 since it's at the top there. 8 expresses anger. 9 disconnects from anger. That's why they check out. And the 1 has trouble with anger in that they very often will feel ashamed at being angry. They don't like being frustrated. They don't like that. So what'll happen is it kind of comes out sideways. And so it says judgmental or perfectionistic or whatever. Okay. All right. For the feeling triad, the 2 expresses their emotions. The 3 disconnects from emotions, and the 4 has trouble with them. So they're and the trouble usually that 4s have, or often that 4s have, is it's too much. It's more emotion, right? In some cases, it isn't expressed like because what they're feeling is shame, but it comes out as blame, or it comes out as anger, it comes out as melancholy, or it comes out as something else. So they have trouble with those. And then in the thinking triad, the 5 expresses because they're really into thinking, right? They're into understanding and knowing and thinking. The 6 disengages from that. It feels like they're thinking because they're making the lists of all the things that could possibly go wrong. But what happens is they fall so much into fear that they disconnect from the actual thinking. And the 7 basically they have trouble with thinking because they don't want to think about it. They just want to go do it. They just want to jump to whatever's the next thing. So I thought this was just a fascinating study of all this. And once again, if you view this as the book about life so that we can learn about ourselves, then it explains all of this. Okay, I think it does anyway. All right. I really like this wheel, and I'm going to cover it very quickly, but we're going to spend a lot of time on this when we get to 12, because this is where so step 12 is all about, in my opinion, is about serving others. And this is what you bring to the world if you are this type. And so I really will spend a lot of time when we get to step 12 on this. But let's start at the top. So 9 brings harmony, 1 brings quality, 2 brings service, 3 brings delivery, right? They deliver. 4 brings creativity, 5 brings insight, 6 brings vigilance, 7 brings vision, and 8 brings drive. And so with all those things that are there, right, can you imagine if you're using that gift, that just wonderful gift that you bring to the world, and you're using that in service to others? That's an amazing thing to show up, I think. Okay. And then on top of all of this are the instincts, the sexual, self-present social instinct. So that almost is like the overlay over everything. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I am going to go over kind of pulling all of these pieces together by type so that everybody feels comfortable with that. If you still feel unsure of your type, just pick one that you think you might be, because this is, once again, a lot of information. I think we have time to finish it. Okay. Notice the little logo there of self-love. All of this, everything is about self-love. And the way that this is going to, that I'm going to roll this out is, notice in the center of the slide, it says moves from resentment to holy perfection. I want you to think, whenever the word holy is there, if you believe in God, then put God's name in there, right? So the 1 moves from resentment to God's perfection, that they understand that they don't need to be perfect. Life doesn't need to be perfect because their God is perfect. Their higher power is perfect. So that is what we mean. So the stuff on the left turns into, as we become our true self, the stuff on the left turns into the stuff on the right, is what we're talking about. Notice the type 1, once again, is a merciful teacher, right? That is at their best. That is what they are. Okay, so let's talk real quick. And once again, we all have heart center, we all have head center, and this is how that shows up in our defenses. The passion for the 1 shows up as anger, and will, with the softening of that ego structure, will turn into, in the heart center, serenity. In the head center, the fixation, the story we tell ourselves, is resentment. So they're angry, and they're angry at them because they didn't behave, they didn't whatever. That's where that resentment is, right? That's the story that they tell themselves. And that turns into God's perfection. People are not perfect. I cannot be perfect. Life cannot be perfect. Higher power can be perfect. All right. The lie that ones live under is that I should be perfect and life should be perfect. And the mantra for the one is, it isn't always my responsibility. All right. The basic fear is being defective, and the basic desire is to be virtuous. And now I'm going to go a little bit deeper into ignore the little body thing. Down at the bottom here. And what I'm talking about is um, basically the wrong assumption of reality. And I'm basing the term reality kind of on Alan Berger's emotional sobriety book. Reality is what is. I don't get to have an opinion on reality. And even if I had an opinion on reality, reality doesn't give a shit about my opinion. It's unrelated to reality. Reality is what it is. So we have some wrong assumptions about reality by type. And then there's a more healing view of reality. And that's what I'm going to cover. So number one is the ones believe that control is possible. A more healthy view of reality would be that control is an illusion. It's completely an illusion. Another wrong assumption is that rules keep us safe. A more healing view of reality would be others don't follow your rules. A wrong assumption about reality is something is not right. A more healing view of reality is that everything is as it should be. And finally, a wrong assumption about reality is that frustration and resentments are normal. Everybody has them. A more healing view of reality is that I can grow past my frustrations and resentments. And you can. All right, the little body, and we talked about anger, and the one has trouble with that. The self-pres and socials deny fear and anger. The sexual acknowledges anger, but will not acknowledge fear. So those are the little wrinkles that make the different subtypes the way that they are. So if you are unsure of your subtype, the question for a one to ask themselves is, do I deny when I'm afraid? And do I deny when I'm angry? That means you're one of those two if the answer is right, is true. The sexual, right, it says, I'm angry, but they won't acknowledge that they're afraid. So that's a really good way to help you figure out, okay, which is that. All right, so this last part that I'm going to do is from the Michael Naylor's The Alchemy book that I've talked about many times because I think it's beautiful. So what I would like ones to do right now is just kind of close your eyes and sit back. I'm going to read his message. It's truncated so that we fit on the page, but this is his message to the one, and I'm going to read it out loud. So one, sit back, close your eyes, and listen to this message. The real you doesn't need to be fixed or improved upon. It patiently waits for presence to arise to help you realize that what you have been seeking is already here in this moment. You are not bad, irredeemable, or defective, not by a long shot. In time, you will see the delightfulness of who you are. And as you relax, your sense of humor will arise. Joy will become your friend. I love that. All right, let's go on to the two. And once again, wherever you see holy, if you feel like it, put in your own mind, God. All right. So the two, and remember self-love. Okay. The two moves from flattery to holy will. And once again, the two is the intuitive healer. Okay. So they're the heart center passion of pride, very often in their work, becomes, when that wall starts to dissipate, it becomes the virtue, which is humility. Their fixation of the story they tell themselves is if they keep telling everybody else how wonderful they are, right? And what happens, they can stop doing that, because what turns into it turns into doing God's will. Actually doing God's will, which means you say no sometimes and you say yes sometimes, and you're guided by your higher power. The lie that lives under is, if I give enough, I will be loved. If I give enough, I'll be loved. And they're already loved. They just don't see that they're already loved because they don't feel loved, right? Because that's their gotcha. And their mantra is, ask for what you need and ask again, for the best love comes from a full well. Their basic fear is being unloved, and their basic desire is to be loved. Down at the bottom of the screen, the wrong assumption of reality. The first of all, they believe, right, often believe survival is based on how others see me, right? If they see me as good and wonderful and basically indispensable, then that's I'll be happy and I'll be able to survive. A more healing view is that survival is based on my higher power and my wants or needs, I guess. Wrong assumption of reality, flattery makes them love me. And a more healing view of reality is that flattery is false and manipulative. A wrong assumption of reality is I try to make others happy. And a more healing view of reality is no one can make someone else happy. That's not even possible. A wrong assumption about reality, I need to intervene to make things okay. And a more healing view of reality is that things will be okay without my help. Now, where it says the feelings, and once again, this is this is part of the heart triad, the feeling triad, and it's the expressed one. Okay, the self-pres 2, it has a difficult time expressing anger. The social 2 represses their fear, and the sexual expresses their emotions. So the sexual 2 will express their emotions, whereas the self-pres has trouble expressing anger. They can express other things. And the social represses their fear. And at least the self-pres and the social do this by smiling even when they're not happy. As an 8, that's like, what? I can't even imagine that. My husband used to tease me, when Cheryl ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So yay, welcome to the world of B8. Okay, so 2s. What I'd like you to do is sit back, close your eyes. I'm going to read the message from Michael Naylor's book, The Message to the 2. Remember this: you will never lose the love of helping people, and your time spent on yourself will actually deepen your ability to give quality attention to others. You must become an expert on putting yourself first in the realm of your recovery. Get the help you need. This effort alone will magnify your capacity to assist others. I'm hoping that everybody buys his book when this is over, because it's just amazing. Okay, now let's move on to the type 3. So the type 3, once again, remember self-love. They move from vanity to holy law. And holy law just means it's the way God's world works, right? So from this vanity that somehow I have to do all this stuff, right? To holy law. All right. The passion, once again, in the feeling center, in the heart center, the passion is self-deceit. They will deceive themselves. And then that grows into the virtue of self-honesty, to be able to still love themselves when they're honest with themselves. And the fixation, right? The fixation for this, which is the stories we tell ourselves, is vanity. And then that goes to holy law, which is basically the way the world works. All right. The lie that 3s live under is, if I seem successful, I will be happy. And the mantra is, to get to truth, I must be informed by my feelings, because very often 3s will basically ignore their feelings completely. The basic fear is that they have no value besides their accomplishment, and their basic desire is to be worthwhile. All right, the wrong assumption at the bottom, wrong assumption of reality: I must perform or I will be discarded. And a more healing view of reality is that performing is optional. No one has to perform in order to be anything. Okay, the wrong assumption is, number 2, we must earn a great reputation. And a more healing view is, others' thoughts of me aren't my business. It's not my business what other people think of me. A wrong assumption of reality: the facade of success equals happiness. And a more healing view is, I am loved regardless of doing or success. A wrong assumption of reality: I am burdened to be the best. It is my burden to bear. I carry that. And a more healing view of reality is to lay down your burden and just hope that God is good. All right, the feelings, and once again, they're part of the feeling triad, the feeling triad, and they basically disconnect from that. So a self-pres 3 can't connect with happiness. A social 3 can't connect with sadness, and a sexual 3 can't connect with fear. All right, 3s, I'd like you to close your eyes and just kind of listen to the message from Michael Naylor from his book, The Alchemy. As you humbly mature, you begin to sense ways in which you can help others as you have been helped, not because you look good doing it or because others are praising you for your good works, but because your heart calls you to help them with no rewards attached. Since your heart is open, you can feel gratitude for the care and generosity others have extended to you, and the desire to pay it forward to others will arise. All right, let's move on to the 4. Once again, all about self-love. They move from melancholy to holy origin. And holy origin means, in essence, that the world is the way the world is supposed to be. This is the way it's supposed to be, right? It's made to be this way. All right. The passion or the feeling of the 4 is centered on envy, and the virtue is equanimity, which is basically we are all one, that feeling that we are all one. The fixation of the 4 is melancholy. And I want to talk for a second about how the melancholy covers envy. So the melancholy feels like it's the end game, but in reality, it's the story we're telling ourselves to cover the envy. So for some reason, envy is more embarrassing to us than melancholy, right? To a 4. So if you can there is a way to get past the melancholy and see the envy. And that's part of the recovery process. Okay. And then the holy idea, once again, is holy origin, or God's original plan, if you will. Okay. The lie that the 4s live under: I am unique and people need to know that. And the mantra is, I have everything I need to grow in this moment. So I can grow. Okay. Their basic fear is to be insignificant, and their basic desire is to create an identity from their own experience. We talked about that earlier. The wrong assumption of reality. So they assume that melancholy is bittersweet. It is bitter, but it is also sweet. A more healing view is melancholy covers envy. It covers envy. Dig deeper. A wrong assumption of reality: I must be special. Just to be even with other people, I must be special. And a more healing view is differences are superficial. We are one. We are all one. We are all alike. A wrong assumption of reality: I'm afraid of being estranged. And the more healing view of reality is my being estranged, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So my fear of being estranged makes me work to be estranged. Okay. The wrong assumption of reality: I see myself as an outsider. And more healing view would be, we can all partake equally in the banquet that is life. We can all partake in that. It's just a matter of working it, right? Okay. They're part of the feeling center and they have trouble with that. They have difficulty connecting to emotions. So the self-pres has difficulty connecting to anger and fear. The social has difficulty connecting to anger and happiness. And the sexual has reactive anger to cover their fear and sadness. So there are 3 types that seem super angry or can, and sexual 4 is one of the ones. The 8 is one, and then the other one is one of the 6s. So the sexual 6. So, but it's reactive anger to cover their fear and sadness. 4s, if you will close your eyes and lean back, I'm going to read you the message from Michael Naylor's book for the 4. You of all types are the most susceptible to giving up. Don't give up. In your darkest hour, which is the darkest of the dark, there can be resurrection and joy. You won't believe this until it happens, but if you keep reaching out for help, doing what is in your hands to do, you will be the phoenix resurrected from the flames, and you will be a great gift of redemption for others. This is fact. Just don't give up. Okay, let's move on to the 5. Once again, self-love, stingy to holy omniscience. And holy omniscience is basically like God's knowledge, God's view of the world. I'll say that, God's view of the world. Okay. The passion is greed, and once again, it's usually greed for knowledge. The virtue in the feeling center, right? That urge to amass, right? And the virtue is non-attachment. The fixation is stingy, and that basically just means I'm going to hoard it. That's a hoarding instinct. And then the holy idea is basically, God's view of the world as opposed to, and that's that it's bountiful and it's full and it's, all those good things. Okay. The lie that fives live under is knowledge is the answer to everything. And the mantra is making contact with my direct experience and feelings will bring greater clarity and knowing. The basic fear is being helpless. Their basic desire is to be competent. The wrong assumption of reality, they believe that energy is finite. And a more healing view of reality is that energy is infinite because energy begets energy. So the more energy that's there, the more energy you have. All right. Wrong assumption number 2 is they get stuck in old ideas and resentments. And a more healing view is to ask the question, do these old ideas make my life better? Right? Because thoughts and feelings are all changeable. We can change them through work, or we can ask God to help us change them, right? Okay. And number 3, I must never be needy. Needy is like completely wrong. I must never be needy, is what the 5 believes. And a more healing view would be the universe will supply all my needs. There's no need for me to be needy because the universe supplies them. And then the final one, the wrong assumption of reality is that the universe is hostile. And a more healing view of reality is that the universe is abundant and giving. All right, 5s, if you will close your eyes and lean back, I'm going to read the message to the 5. When that urge to bolt and leave the playing field hits you, because it will, leave only for a short while. Come back as soon as you can. Gently step into your discomfort with talking about feelings, into your insecurity with being with those crazy humans. Hang in there long enough to let the miracle land inside you. We need your gift of intelligence and creativity. We need your kind and wise heart. All right, let's move on to the 6. So the 6, once again, it moves from cowardice to holy faith. And once again, that's faith that things are unfolding as they should. Oops, on the backwards. Sorry about that. Let's go forward. Okay. All right, so the passion is fear and resolves to courage, obviously, and that's the feeling. That feeling of fear moves to courage. The story that we tell ourselves, and once again, the fixation says, "I'm afraid, so I won't do this." That's how that plays. The fixation. No, of course I'm not going to do this because I'm afraid. And what happens is it resolves itself with work to holy faith, that God will take care of me. This is how they walk through the fear. This is how they walk through that, right? That's the growth for the 6. Okay. The lie that the 6 lives under is that people are untrustworthy and I must keep myself safe. And then once again, the mantra is that faith is believing in things unseen. I am guided within by your higher power, right? That's how it ties to the holy faith. And then the basic fear is that they cannot survive on their own. And their basic desire is to be supported. All right, the wrong assumption of reality. They make the list of fears so that they can rest. But a more healing view of reality is life is an unforeseeable adventure. We can't see anything. It's just an adventure, right? How many of this huge number list of all the things that could go wrong, how many did? Right? None of us are psychic. Well, maybe there are some psychics, but I'm not one, right? And probably you weren't either. So instead of the list of fears, because that is a lie, that list of fears means you can rest. Do you rest? No, you just have a list of fears. Okay, the next one. Early fear helps keep me safe. A more healing view would be my fear keeps me blind to reality. You can't even enjoy right now because you're blind to reality. Okay. And this is how sixes pitch themselves into the future. I have a friend that says she throws herself into the ruin of her future. Right. Okay. Number 3, I can avoid bad things. And I put whistling here because this is like whistling past a graveyard, if you've heard that saying. And it means that, it's graveyards are scary, but if I just whistle past it, nothing can get me. So I can avoid bad things just by, whistling past the graveyard. And the final number 4 is if I know the end, I'd be good. If I knew what was going to happen, I'd be good. And so 3 and 4 on the more healing view of reality is everything will be all right in the end. If it's not all right, it's not the end. Like deep breath. All right. If 6s, if you will close your eyes, I want to read you the message from Michael Naylor from his book. You can find support. Learn to trust yourself to bring forth your wonderful gifts of serving others. connecting them to their best and heralding the underdog. The world needs you and you deserve to be here, so keep showing up. There is much hope for you. Slowly, out of the fog of fear and anxiety will arise a solid inner confidence and a sense that you can trust yourself and you can trust life. Persist. I love this book. Okay, let's go to 7. 7 moves from insatiable to God's plan. And once again, they plan, right? Jump here and there and jump here and there. And they basically move to God's plan because God has a plan. Okay, so the heart center, they feel like they need more and more and more, unique and different and more, right? And their virtue is they realize that they have enough. The fixation is they believe that all of these plans and all of this stuff will satisfy them. And in reality, God's plan will satisfy them. And that's where they land. The 7s live under that lie that more is better, always, always, always. And their mantra is focus and staying present are my holy work. I am enough. Their basic fear is to be trapped in pain, and their basic desire is to be satisfied. The wrong assumption of reality is that gluttony, right, so that needing more can be satisfied. And the more healing view of reality is that gluttony is insatiable. There is no satisfying it. It is just always more. The number 2, miracle plans make me happy. When I make all these miracle plans, they make me happy. A more healing view of reality would be to realize that we actually live in the present, not the future, right now. The wrong assumption of reality, the future's so bright, we need sunglasses. Okay. Number 3, on the more healing view of reality, is that let's savor what is here and now. And then finally, they have a feeling that they are restless and dissatisfied. And a more healing view of reality is to be calm, awaiting my higher power's plan for me. All right, they are the thinking. They have trouble with thinking. They're self-pres, meaning they're restless, not thoughtful. The social chooses to distract themselves, and the sexual lives in fantasy. So 7s, if you'll close your eyes, I want to go ahead and read that final thing from Michael Naylor's book. Develop deeper intuitive knowing through your practice of stillness meditation. Begin to trust your inner stillness, rest in it, nurture it, and a single-minded clarity will begin to settle in your consciousness. The wisdom to know what to act on and what to pass on will arise and inform you. Intuitive guidance, the jewel you seek, will direct you to your heart's fulfillment. All right, let's move on to the 8. So the 8 moves from avenger to seeker of truth. Their passion, that feeling center, is this lust for intensity, and their virtue is to be able to see the world through fresh eyes. Their fixation is revenge, and basically avenging anything that they see as unjust. And in the end, what they resolve to is a holy truth. So God's truth, right? They seek the truth as opposed to feeling the need to avenge. The lives that they live under is I must be strong and in charge to be complete. And the mantra for the 8 is in my vulnerability lies my strength. Basic fear is of being controlled, and their basic desire is to determine their own course. The wrong assumption of reality that they live under, that they are appointed, I guess by God, appointed to right the wrongs of the world. And a more healing view of reality is that control is an illusion. Okay, a wrong assumption of reality, I can see the bigger picture. I'm smart, I see the bigger picture. A more healing view of reality is that God's picture is way bigger than my picture. A wrong assumption is it's up to me, you know. If it is to be, it's up to me, right? And a more healing view of reality is what if somebody else does it? What if someone else besides me did that? And a wrong assumption of reality is that I am the bigger dog to bullies. And a more healing view of reality would be, let's assess the situation before I jump in. All right. They are part of the body triad. Anger is that thing, and they are the ones who express anger. In the self-pres, that anger covers sadness. In the social and sexual, that anger covers fear. 8s, if you want to lean back, I'd like to read this from Michael Naylor's book. Your deep gift is to empower others to arise and own their innate power and autonomy. As you model and embody this in your personal, action-filled, passionate life, your magnanimous heart will activate the can-do courage of those you touch. I'm an 8, so this is obvious why I love Michael Naylor's book. He likes 8s, which makes me happy. Okay, and the 9. The 9 moves from slothful to holy love. Think of God's love. 9s are lovely, lovely people. Every 9 in my life I adore. Okay, so their passion is sloth, which is once again the delay in action, delay in decision. And their virtue, what they move to, is right action. Their fixation is indolence, which is free from pain. They really want to be free from pain. They don't like pain, they don't like conflict. And the holy idea is holy love, God's love, to bring God's love to the world. 9s live under the lie that they live under is, I'll think about that tomorrow. We can all get along, right? And the mantra is resolve small things before they become big things. Their basic fear is to be destroyed, and their basic desire is to have peace of mind. The wrong assumption of reality, they believe that they should be free from pain. That's why they check out. A more healing view of reality is that life includes pain. It isn't all pain, but pain is part of life. A wrong assumption of reality is it is good for them to distract themselves. A more healing view of reality is that there is some work that is important that I have to do. The wrong assumption of reality would be that they believe that they do not matter. A more healing view of reality is you matter. You age in the world, you matter. A wrong assumption is that they believe indolence creates harmony, that this checking out creates harmony. And a more healing view is that indolence creates a lack of participation. When they check out of life and they don't participate in life. Okay, they are part of the anger triad, that body triad, and they disengage. So the self-pres loses touch with happiness. The social and sexual lose touch with anger. 9s, if you'll lean back, I want to read Michael Naylor's message to you. You are ready to rock and roll your way down the aisle of recovery. Yes, there will be bumps, but they will be good bumps that provide growth experiences. And besides, although you are playing the most difficult game in town, you can rest assured that it is the one game truly worth playing. All right, so these are all the 9 types. Don't forget office hours. I'm going to cover here 8 a.m. Pacific. I'm going to cover the assignment here real quick. And this is the weekly wrap-up challenge. For the type 1, you're going to journal or meditate on if you believe this, what would your life look like? And once again, it's control is an illusion. Others will never follow your rules. Everything in life is as it should be right now. It is possible to outgrow judgmentalism. These basically are the same things that were the when I had the basically wrong assumptions about reality and then the right assumptions, or at least the more healthy assumptions. That's what these are. So I'm not going to cover these. They're out there, and Joy has posted them now so you can look at them. Journal on these, right? On this more healthy thing. What would happen if that is what I believe? And I'll use the 8, right? If I believe that control is illusion, I have to believe that, by the way. I have to believe that there is no, I can't control. Matter of fact, when I say step 1, acknowledged we were powerless over reality, right? It just, I don't have to control anything. God's view is broader than mine, and I've often said that, right? If God has this big picture that I can't even imagine how big that is, you know what? Give that to God. What happens if I let others do the work? I'm working on that. I'm better at it. And then what if I slow down and let others make the decisions? Let others make decisions and realize that it's not up to me to do that. It doesn't have to be up to me. Anyway, so you get the idea. One of the things I want to do, let me see. Okay, so you're going to memorize your mantra, which we talk about, do the weekly wrap-up challenge, and read the paragraphs on this link, which is on the levels of development, because that's one of the things we're covering next week are the levels of development. I am open to do office hours at other times. I know right now it's 8 a.m. Pacific time, which works well for people in Europe. That's nice because that's in their early evening, but it probably doesn't work well for people in the US that are working. So if you go on WhatsApp and say, hey, can we put together an office hour at whatever time? I'll see if I can make that work. And I'm very willing to do that because I know there's a lot of questions out there. And if you don't come to office hours, it makes it really difficult to ask the questions. And I'd like to answer them. All right. So this is what we have left. So we have 8, which is level shadows and blind spots, 9, which is owning it to release it, 10, which is deeper into the wings, living clean, 11, Enneagram and spiritual seeking, and 12, deeper into the arrows and serving others. And that is it. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thanks for recovering with us at Surrender School.